Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from Ankara. Welcome to this meeting on post-election analysis about Kosovo. My name is Mehmet Uğur Ekinci. I am a foreign policy researcher at SETA in Ankara. The title of today's panel is Assessing Kosovo's Election Results, What to Expect Next. Indeed, the elections that took place in Kosovo on 14th of February ended with a very interesting result. The Vetëvendosje Movement, which has been known as an anti-establishment political movement, received a landslide victory, while the predominant parties in Kosovo's politics have received serious losses of vote. And now, there are a number of questions that come to mind with regard to Kosovo's internal developments during the next term, next government, under the next government, as well as the wider implications of political changes in Kosovo in Balkan politics. So there are plenty of events and opinions raised about what can happen in Kosovo and in the Balkans after the elections, the February elections. So at SETA, we have organized a web panel, and I'm delighted that we have very distinguished speakers today, 4 speakers, who are all experts on Balkan politics and especially experts on Kosovo. So I am very interested to hear their opinions and comments regarding the elections and after in Kosovo. So without further delay, I would like to introduce our speakers because we have already 4 speakers, so our time is a bit tight. I would like to ask all our speakers to give their comments within 15 minutes maximum, and hopefully then we will have some questions coming from the audience. This event is currently broadcast live on SETA's platforms, on different social media websites and applications. So I would like to hear the comments and questions coming from the audience so I can forward them to our speakers. All right, so let's turn to our first speaker, who is Dr. İsa Blumi. He's an associate professor at Stockholm University Institute for Turkish Studies within the Department of Asian, Middle Eastern and Turkish Studies. He received his PhD from New York University, and in his research, he focuses on societies in the throes of social, economic, and political transformation. And he has published extensively on Ottoman history and successor regimes of the Ottoman Empire and current developments in the Balkans. So, Dr. Blumi, I would like to ask if you could comment on the historical and socio-political processes that led to the rise of the Vetëvendosje and its recent landslide victory. I mean, how can we explain all this?
Thank you for having me join your audience, and it's good to see some of old friends again. Vetëvendosje, which is really a phenomenon drawing from the enduring struggle for peoples of Kosovo since indeed the end of the Ottoman Empire, in fact, to find some kind of equal balance between the immediate needs of sustenance as well as the dignity that comes with being either autonomous or independent politically, culturally, economically. And the enduring legacy of the Balkan Wars, the direct occupation of Kosovo, the systematic efforts to depopulate or demographically transform the population, in the meantime, to exploit it economically as a region that could provide the necessary wealth production of first a kingdom of some sort, and then after World War II, a reconfigured socialist federation that still retained the exploitative relationship that Kosovars experienced with Belgrade, built generations of very different kinds of resistance. The most devastating over the long term, however, has been large swaths of the populations actually leaving their homelands to find resettlement opportunities in Turkey, which often facilitated with agreements with Belgrade to accept large numbers of Kosovars on the basis that they were either Muslims who could be easily assimilated into Turkey, or who could then continue on as guest workers to Western Europe later on. Similarly, large numbers of Kosovar Albanians especially ended up indeed leaving for industrializing Western Europe in the 1960s and 70s, creating, ironically enough, an important channel of communication and economic exchange that actually allowed Kosovars to have some leverage by the fact that they had family members earning German marks or Swiss francs in the 70s and 80s. So they were able to at least sustain some kind of very shallow existence in Kosovo as autonomous entities. That's translated into, I think, probably what shaped Vetëvendosje's most charismatic and indeed public figure, Albin Kurti, who as a young student in high school even was already leading efforts to try to address the egregious human rights abuses, the lack of self-determination, the basically impossibility of imagining a life outside of Serbia's direct control that was continuous from the beginning of the 20th century until the outbreak of wars in Yugoslavia in the early 90s. And Albin Kurti, as a well-known student activist, got himself in trouble quite often with the officials in Kosovo, often officials who were Albanians themselves. He had developed a reputation of being able to outwit in argument anyone who tried to defy him. So the basic tactics was to suppress him and his closest allies. He helped organize an organization called KAN, Kosovo Action Network, that was actually a larger international operation since 1997 to try to somehow bring the profile of Kosovo's plight to the larger world, as well as mobilize people inside Kosovo to act, let's say, more effectively against the oppressive government coming from Belgrade that was personified in Milosevic. And importantly, KAN had a very different approach than the main party at the time, led by Ibrahim Rugova. And this would lead for the subsequent decade or so of antagonism between Albin Kurti, his allies, like-minded allies, who really wanted to see him push a political agenda that was not complicitory. It was not one willing to negotiate Kosovo's independence, Kosovo's destination for some kind of mediated middle ground, which was the forte, unfortunately, of Rugova, and as we learned subsequently after the war, others who became political leaders in Kosovo. So Albin Kurti was arrested. He ended up in prison in Serbia and was only released well after the end of the war. It was assumed that his political future was limited, and yet he was able to step right back in, already quite charismatically from Serbian prisons, able to unleash discourse that enabled certain elements of Kosovar's activist society to actually believe that there was an alternative to what was NATO's, UN's mediation, and the offer of basically autonomy, freedom from oppression, slow economic integration, but really not much hope in terms of being really independent. And so this would be an ongoing campaign that would lead KAN to actually transform into what is today Vetëvendosje. It became a very active party at the time when Kosovo's independence was, at least on paper, ready to be negotiated, but the terms of that independence was very much one that was not to the liking of large numbers of Kosovar Albanians. And this is where Albin Kurti's outspokenness, his resilience, his ability to articulate the frustrations of Albanians inside Kosovo, in neighboring Albania and Macedonia, as well as in the larger diaspora, which I must remind the audience, well over half the Kosovo's population are actually in the diaspora over several generations. And they constitute a very powerful and important component to the story moving forward. Albin Kurti's ability to articulate these frustrations, this underlying recognition that the political elites that had been picked and chosen by NATO, by the UN, by the United States especially, were not really pushing the agenda that would resolve the economic destitution of upwards of 50% of Kosovo's under 25 who still live in a conditions of unemployment. It's very hard to foresee Kosovo's economy to move much beyond where its failed state at this stage. The constant negotiation and selling off of Kosovo's key assets to often for pennies on the dollar, reminiscent of very much what happened to Soviet Union in the early 90s, certainly continued to frustrate Kosovars who were nationalistic, who believed that there was an opportunity for Kosovo to carve out a place in the larger world that was independent, that was predicated on this principle of self-determination. And again, Kurti was really able to articulate these frustrations, and by 2017 really became the biggest, most popular party in Kosovo, despite not being able to enter into some coalition. As all the parties that now have, as we've seen from the last election, really lost out, refused to cooperate and work with Albin Kurti. And this lack of cooperation, this often very hostile attitude towards Kurti and his cohort, which, as we can see now, easily half the voter population embrace his message, has led to an enduring conflict, not only domestically in terms of politics between Albanian parties, but also Kosovo's, let's say, mentors in the larger world. The United States does not think kindly of people like Vetëvendosje's leaders, especially Albin Kurti. Unfortunately, even Turkey has had a very difficult relationship with Vetëvendosje, which has consistently tried to thwart these privatization schemes, especially regarding the airport, regarding KEK, which is the electricity, and then telecom companies that were national assets that were being sold off very cheaply by the old political parties. And Vetëvendosje was standing up to this. And this frustrated the political elites that who are now hopefully forced to reconsider now that popular politics has risen up and put this man, Albin Kurti, and his very strong coalition of supporters into the position of actually changing things on the ground. It's another thing to suggest that actually this will happen. If I will be invited to further elaborate in the next section, I will highlight just how, historically speaking, the Biden administration connected to what was happening to Kosovo in relation to Obama's period, and even Clinton's period before that, does not bode well for this coalition that Albin Kurti has been established with Vetëvendosje at the lead. And certainly the politics in the larger region will have to be reconsidered, and one will have to wonder just how effective will Kurti's efforts to focus on domestic issues, domestic needs, revitalize the economy, find jobs, create spaces for a very talented population who is very, very young, who is very, very ambitious, but also very, very volatile, very frustrated. And unfortunately, my concern is that larger regional politics will yet again dictate the extent to which either Albin Kurti or Albanian Kosovars as a whole could actually create the space for themselves to actually take the move forward and actually push this self-determination, which is the ethos and the founding principles of Albin Kurti's political party, and the basis of his quite remarkable support that has manifested in this second electoral victory. And we'll see what happens if indeed his efforts to find a solution for Kosovo's domestic problems are going to be thwarted by, unfortunately, the larger politics of the region that are very much shaping Biden's policies moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Background information, it was very helpful to understand the background conditions that led the rise of the Vetëvendosje, and especially the enduring economic and social problems in Kosovo seemingly was the most important factor that led to this outcome. And also, as you told, some leadership skills of Albin Kurti was very influential in making this grassroots movement into a political party. So thank you very much again. By using this background information, now we will try to make sense of what will happen next under the new political atmosphere in Kosovo. So as our second speaker, I would like to go to Istanbul, where Erhan Türbedar is going to join us from. Dr. Erhan Türbedar, originally from Kosovo, received his PhD from Gazi University with a thesis on the transportation policies in Southeast Europe countries. And he has published on Southeast Europe, its politics and its economy at different think tanks in Turkey, and lectured on the Balkans at Turkish universities. He worked as senior advisory positions in international organizations, including the Regional Cooperation Council and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Currently, he works as a senior consultant at the Cooperation Council of Turkic-speaking states. So I would like to ask you, Erhan, bearing in mind the future changes in Kosovo political scene and the ongoing dynamics of global and regional politics, how would you comment on the future of Kosovo?
Mehmet, first of all, I would like to thank you and SETA, of course, for inviting me to attend to this meeting. I apologize from all your guests because just last minute development took place. I'm in another meeting and just gave a short break in order to be able to say a few words. I will try to be as brief as possible, and with apologizing to leave the meeting earlier. Using this opportunity, let me also greet your guests, particularly my dear friend, Ambassador Leon Malazogu, if he is online. Well, in my opinion, Kurti did a political revolution in Kosovo. The last results shows that it reminds me actually in those historical moments when people take their destinies in their hands, and these moments are very rare in the history of the people. And I think that this moment just happened with such a big victory there. I agree that it was a kind of referendum towards existing political parties, and lessons have to be learned from these results, because unfortunately for many years I was always speaking that we have to do something else anymore in Kosovo. It's not anymore for politicians to speak about status. Status is there. Kosovo is one unquestionable factor in international system. So it's not anymore enough to speak only for those issues. Politicians have to speak more about the economy, more about creating jobs. And from that perspective, I think that this will be a new beginning for the Kosovo and its history in general. And I think that Albin Kurti and his political movement was very clever. In which way very clever? While I was working for Regional Cooperation Council in Sarajevo, we were producing a monitoring tool called Balkan Barometer. And still this tool is going on. If you look to the results of that tool, not only in Kosovo, in all region of Southeast Europe, when we ask people what their biggest considerations are related to many items, including minority issues, border issues, many of these big issues, terrorism, etc. First three results always appear in the following order. One, people want more economy, which means that only those governments which are able to provide better economic environment will be elected in the future. Second, people want more jobs, People want more jobs. And third thing that people want from Balkan Barometer for many years, the same results, is fight against corruption, which is very pandemic, which is more pandemic than COVID-19 in the societies of Southeast Europe. And Kurti was, in my opinion, very clever because he took the essence of what people want from him and why they vote for him. So what we are going to expect in the internal policy in the future, I think it will be more economy, dealing more with economic issues, fight against organized crime, fight against corruption. This will be also very, very tough issue. Very difficult days will be in place, maybe including high-level corruption issues. Plus, of course, Kurti have to deal with better integrating north of Kosovo into the political system of Kosovo. Unfortunately, another topic that I'm insisting for many years, that solution should be on place about north of Kosovo. Otherwise, north of Kosovo will remain as a small Kosovo issue. Now, north of Kosovo became small Kosovo issue within Kosovo itself. And this solution is needed. And only solution is, in my opinion, to better integrate North Kosovo into the political system of Kosovo, through respecting maybe some administrative rights at the local level. Nobody needs creations of a new Republika Srpska there. We saw the mistake which is done in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This shouldn't be any kind of solution, although maybe Belgrade would like to have such solution. Of course, within internal policy, at least in the shorter period, COVID will be high on the agenda of Kosovo, because COVID is creating very, very big effects on our on our economies, on our societies, health sectors, and even maybe some political shifts in global relations. Who knows? We cannot still predict when we are going to get out. Maybe after second quarter, maybe the day second quarter of this year, or maybe the day when immunization of our society through vaccines is been over. But still, at least during this year, COVID will be, as in case of all countries, high of the agenda of Albin Kurti government, in my opinion. When it comes to external policy, I think that there are some similarities, not maybe ideological. I don't want to say ideologically, but I just remembered the period of 1980s when Papandreou and PASOK came to power. After many years being restricted political left in Greece, they have been allowed to be political power, and 1980s are actually years of PASOK and Papandreou in Greece. As I said, I'm not comparing them ideologically, but I'm trying to give the following example. When Papandreou came to power, the first thing that he done, and that he used this following 1980s, was to say to the Western countries, okay, we are allies, but this does not mean that I have to do and implement everything that you request from me. So in that position, I think that Kurti, of course, will keep his contacts with European Union, with US, with all allies of Kosovo, all friends of Kosovo, not only Western countries, including Turkey and many others. However, the period when somebody could say everything and implement whatever it wants to Kosovo, I think it will be over together with Albin Kurti. Of course, huge pressure on Kurti will exist, particularly from the EU, because this issue of negotiations, I'm coming now slowly to relations with Serbia. Of course, in international politics, Kosovo should continue to deal with the issue of further recognizing, getting more recognizings from international community. But this system is working. This is nothing new. This will continue somehow. Ambassador Leon Malazogu will do his great job in this direction. What I'm trying to say, I think that EU wants a success story in the case of Kosovo. Because if you look to the EU foreign policy in the 1990s, unfortunately, Europe was not successful in the Balkans. They couldn't ease the conflicts, they couldn't prevent everything. And the reason was that interest of individual countries were much more stronger than the EU common approach. Now this picture has been changed a bit, but still EU has a serious difficulties in transforming 27 voices into the single one. And particularly after this migration crisis, what we saw in Europe was many invisible divisions. It was not only division between East and West of the Europe, this historical ideological division, but we saw also divisions between North and South. So many divisions are there, and EU has really significant problem in transforming these 27 voices into the single one. And in the case of Kosovo, they need a success story. For many years, you are present there. You are negotiating. You are you have to come with a solution. Otherwise, you will appear again unsuccessful, as it was the case in 1990s. From that perspective, this will be in general, Western Balkans were a kind of test for strength of EU foreign security policy during in the period after 1990s. So pressure from European countries will continue for the dialogue with Serbia, and I believe that negotiations will continue somehow. It is different when you are opposition. In opposition, we are speaking everything, saying everything, but when you take responsibility of being a leader of one country, of one nation, the issue is a bit different. So you have to find a common position. You have to soften some hard position and sit and negotiate. Okay, so I believe negotiations will continue. I don't know when, but it will be there, maybe in different format, but it will be there. The question that I would like to raise here, and that I'm raising from many issues and also asking Serbian officials in this direction, is following. What is the ultimate objective of normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia? Why they are negotiating? Okay, it started with simplifying with some practical issues, connectivity, mobility of people, etc., recognizing of diplomas, and these were the things that have to be done, of course, because you are in the same geography, economically, and in many aspects interrelated in the region. However, what is the ultimate objective? When these negotiations should stop? And I couldn't get the answer from nobody. What is the ultimate objective of normalization of relations? I believe that German approach is still in flow at the end of the day, and I think that this will be also acceptable for Kurti, but I'm not sure whether Serbia is ready to do something like this. The mission from the very beginning, expectation of Germany was based on the model of East and West Germany. They were not recognizing each other, but both of them had a seats within the UN. Of course, negotiations now which are getting flowed, I think that ultimate objective is to get seats within the UN for both countries, particularly now in case of Kosovo, of course, for Kosovo, even if they don't recognize each other. Kosovo is recognizing Serbia, of course, but Serbia is not recognizing Kosovo. But whether this will be acceptable for Serbia, we are not still sure. Of course, there is a huge difference. In case of Germany, the ultimate objective was unification. So they had temporary divided, separate stances, memberships in the UN, but at the long term aim was unification, which happened. But in the case of Serbia and Kosovo, this most ultimate objective, I think, is after getting these UN seats, not to unify them, but to find a platform to peacefully separate them and close this issue of Kosovo. In any case, Kosovo is a reality. We will listen more again. These bilateral oscillations for sure will take place with speech, etc. This is something normal, unfortunately, in the Balkans, particularly after EU slowed down its interest. Actually, interest is there somehow. The issue is that in reality, EU enlargement process does not function very well, and it is immediately reflected on the behavior of the countries in the region. Before 3 years, dialogue was much more constructive, but last 3 years that I saw these bilateral oscillations, even if they are not producing big issues, but still they are producing negative elements which are affecting relations in the region. So we will have again political oscillations, but still I would like to hear also from other participants to see what their opinion is. What is this ultimate objective of negotiations between Kosovo and Serbia? Because at the end of the day, what we are going to speak about Kosovo will be in this direction in the coming period. Whole world and media will be focused actually on this status aspect. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you, Erhan, for this great intervention. And you also kept the time perfectly. I mean, if you are able to stay, I would love you to stay, but apparently you need to leave. So,
unfortunately, okay. I have to leave. I hope for your understanding. And again, I hope that you will organize and bring us together, maybe in the times after COVID, that we can elaborate and speak on these issues in more details. My best regards to all your participants.
Thank you very much again. Okay, so Erhan mentioned a number of different things regarding the factors leading to the Vetëvendosje's win, and he also provided us with some of his comments regarding what will happen next. And one of the key things that I extracted from his speech is Vetëvendosje may have to dilute some of its pledges, promises, or arguments when in government. And he gave the example of PASOK. And I myself remember in early 2015, I moderated a panel about what would happen next in Greece after the election of Syriza, another leftist and anti-establishment movement. But what happened in the end was, yes, Syriza was able to make certain remarkable achievements, especially if thinking about the resolution of the Macedonian name issue. But there were also big disillusionments from its voters about its economic policies and its relations with the West. And finally, the party also had to change its attitude, and later it lost the power. But we will see if these things can happen in Kosovo. To be sure, Kosovo has more challenges and problems than Greece. So I would like to turn to our third speaker, who is Leon Malazogu, participating from Pristina. Leon Malazogu is a political analyst and the former ambassador of Kosovo to Japan. He was the co-founder and executive director of the Pristina-based think tank called Democracy for Development Institute. He holds an MA in International Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution from the University of Notre Dame. He has taught at various universities in Kosovo, North Macedonia, as well as at the Arizona State University. Previously, he also served as a regional representative for the European Center for Minorities, as research director at the Kosovar Institute for Policy Research and Development, and as an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Kosovo. So now, may I request you to comment on the domestic and foreign policy priorities of the prospective government in Kosovo, and how and whether the Vetëvendosje can really fulfill its ambitions?
Well, teşekkür, Mehmet, and thank you also to Erhan Bey for referring, and thanks for having to both Isa and Erhan for a good sort of background talk about this. I won't be much shorter than the 15 minutes. I'd rather maybe speak more if there are questions, more specific questions after that. But before I start, one of the reasons I like to speak to Turkish think tanks is that you usually call, say, Kosovo But today, Mehmet, you're saying Kosovo, so I'm joking. But it's Kosovo. It's usually very refreshing when we speak to most Turkish interlocutors. Let me just start by one thing which Erhan mentioned, and he says we should have talked about economy a long time ago. At the same time, very often we get feedback and not to say pressure from the international community. Very often that they say, well, they used to tell us that the shortest way to develop the economy is to conclude the dialogue with Serbia first. And so there's a bit of a catch-22 dynamic here, is that that all previous administrations have been faced. But for this election results, I think I see there's more surprise internationally than in Kosovo. Vetëvendosje staged a good performance in 2017. They did even better in 2019. And in a way, the way they fell from power, for most Kosovars perceived it as that there was some sort of organized fashion to prevent them from exercising power, and they returned with even larger mandate. What is interesting to see, actually, it was the largest mandate ever given to a political party in Kosovo. And what is more interesting is that this victory was done without really major promises. It was, in a way, a strong motion of no confidence for the outgoing political elite, not necessarily for particular parties, but overall for the elite, and citizens were asking for something fresh. So most of the debate was for domestic issues and reasons. And interestingly, this was also the first election campaign where whether we get visa liberalization to the EU was not really part of the discourse. So the Vetëvendosje won the mandate purely talking about anti-corruption, talking about a bit more equitable development, and so on. If there was any international dimension to it, was sort of a rejection of how parts of the international community treated Kosovo, and related to dialogue, let's say, delay with acquiring visa liberalization. Remember, Kosovo has been now quite a few years that Kosovo has fulfilled all the criteria, and but still, now the political objections to Kosovo get acquiring visa liberalization from some member countries. So in a way, this completely disappeared from the discourse and from the narrative, and Vetëvendosje won purely based on the domestic agenda. And now it's not for no surprise, dialogue with Serbia is not part of the top priorities, and justice, anti-corruption, and development, and other policy agendas are higher up. And a short comment on the name. While Vetëvendosje does indeed mean self-determination, and this was certainly part of the identity, a clear primary identity of this movement when it started at the outset. But today's Vetëvendosje is much more of an anti-corruption outfit. It is clear that this will certainly be part of the narrative, and Mr. Kurti himself is a strong believer in the anti-colonialist movement, and also in the development models of anti-colonial models. At the same time, this party has moved much closer to the mainstream. I think it's far less room to accuse them as nationalists as they were accused in the past, or as leftists. And also, the composition of the MP candidates of this party is much more various and much more diverse. So Mr. Kurti has managed to put under one roof to include people of very different backgrounds to achieve this result. So basically, Vetëvendosje, which won 2 weeks ago, is quite a different outfit. And certainly, as Erhan said, every party, when they have to govern, they have to become much more pragmatic in many ways, and I mean that in a good sense, not in a negative sense. So I expect Vetëvendosje to cooperate with the international community. The first signs are quite good. Mr. Kurti has demonstrated quite good maturity and more of a statesman-like approach on the election eve. For example, he urged his followers not to be triumphant, not to go out to celebrate with cars, as the custom is. He has vowed not to take revenge. So it is early, but overall the level of enthusiasm in Kosovo is very high of a new beginning. And certainly the large margin of victory should urge critics to give plenty of time for the new government to settle properly and to start to govern before they can start to criticize. At the same time, it's a bit refreshing, even for those who disagree, it's a bit refreshing that for the first time Kosovo will have a government which will not depend on small parties. For a few previous governments, small parties in coalition was really, in a way, the cancer of governance, because they would have significant demands, not only to form the government, but even to vote for every law or every decision. There would be demands which lowered the quality of governance. And the level of mandate for this government will be refreshing in the sense that they will be able to govern properly and without having to sort of expect the vote without too much horse trading or negotiations in the background to get decisions approved. So I'll stop right here. And I'll be happy to continue if there are specific questions after that.
Thank you very much, Leon, for your intervention. You give a very concise but a comprehensive commentary about the future in Kosovo. So without further wait, I would like to get our fourth speaker, who is joining us from Berlin, Ms. Engjellushe Morina, who is a senior policy fellow with the Wider Europe program at the European Council on Foreign Relations. She works from ECFIA's Berlin office. She holds degrees from University College London, Oxford University, and the Hertie School of Governance. She has more than 18 years of experience of research on and fieldwork in the Western Balkans. Prior to joining European Council on Foreign Relations, she co-founded and ran the Pristina Council on Foreign Relations, and she was the executive director of another think tank named Kosovo Stability Initiative. So, Engjellushe, what do you think are the challenges to normalization in Kosovo, and how can normalization be achieved?
Thanks a lot, Mehmet. Thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be talking to you and together with the other panelists on this issue that has been really topical nowadays. Has attracted a lot of attention, as I was saying earlier on. It's quite an amazing phenomena for many. I'd like to start by saying that Albin Kurti and Vetëvendosje are not a novelty in Kosovo or the Balkans. They have been around for many years now. As one of the previous speakers, Blumi, mentioned, they have been part of the ICAN originally and then continued with the movement. But Albin Kurti himself is an established political leader in Kosovo for more than 20 years now. He is well aware of what he's going to be dealing with. He has a clear picture, I think, and a vision what he will get on to be doing in running the new government. As he has been, like I said, around for quite a long time, and despite all the obstacles, he persevered, and here we are. He's got the close to 50% result in the last election, and I think this is probably a combination of not just the frustration of population with all the previous governments or the lack of delivery of the previous governments, but also the fact that a very promising government of early last year, which Kurti ran with a junior coalition partner, LDK, was brought to an end just after 52 days due to international pressure on the dialogue. So just a side note, this was the third government in Kosovo that was brought down because of lack of political coherence in Kosovo, how to continue with the dialogue with Serbia. And so if I understood your question right, I think it was more kind of more directed towards the normalization process that Kosovo and Serbia are supposedly going through and will have to complete in one way or another in the near future. But I would just like to stop maybe in the domestic scene for a little bit. I think Kosovo is a very weak state. It has really weak economy. It has huge unemployment. It has been weakened further by the pandemics. So there are many internal issues that are quite pressing. And then there is the very weak statehood that Kosovo had kind of suffered from, especially in the past few years, because everything has been so much focused on the process of the dialogue with Serbia, and more or less everything else was either very kind of rashly done or ignored. Issues like economy, it was mentioned a couple of times by previous speakers. So I think before Kosovo goes into prioritizing normalization with Serbia, I think it's quite wise that an internal focus has to be prioritized, basically. And all the issues that have been mentioned in the campaign are very crucial issues. Corruption is indeed endemic in Kosovo. There is not only high-level corruption, but I think the problem is also petty corruption that one finds in various levels of local governance in Kosovo. And of course, there are socio-economic issues quite pressing that Vetëvendosje has vowed to look into. So I think this is already good news and a kind of a positive step to focus on. But like Leon was saying, we need to wait a little bit until the government is in place, and then we can maybe start criticizing and analyzing further. Because so far the election process has not ended. The counting is still going on, and we need to also wait and see what format the government, or what shape or form the government will take, who will be the particular ministers, and so on and so forth. So this brings me to maybe to look into the question a little bit more directly. So with all this in mind, I think really the dialogue is not a priority, not just in rhetoric, but I think in reality it shouldn't be. It's not for now. It has stopped. There has been no meetings since September between Kosovo and Serbia, and it's not very clear when the next meeting will be. So I think a lot of work also needs to go into clarifying what the whole process was about, because I think in recent years the main aim of this process between Kosovo and Serbia has been a bit blurred. Initially, it started as a dialogue facilitated, as a technical dialogue facilitated by EU, based on a resolution decided by the UN Security Council, following the International Court of Justice that ruled that Kosovo was totally within the rights of, within the frameworks of international law to proclaim independence. This was then taken further to UN, and a resolution that led to a resolution that there has to be another dialogue process to run, facilitated by EU, which, by the way, US was totally marginalized in this. There's no mentioning of US in this resolution. So then we ended up with starting a technical dialogue in 2011. Even then, it was not so clear what the normalization process actually means. And so we can assume that it meant, Kosovo will be a fully functioning state the minute that it finds a comfortable solution into accommodating Serb community in particular in Kosovo. So I think we have been really talking all along since 2011 how to find a solution to the north of Kosovo. And since 2011, in fact, since 2008, the situation in the north of Kosovo has deteriorated, especially in recent years has deteriorated even further. And I think those who follow what goes on in Kosovo have noticed that, north is quite volatile, especially with the recent, if I could say, campaign behavior of a party that is directly linked to the president of Serbia, Lista Srpska. So in 2008, just as a side note, when Kosovo proclaimed its independence, local Serbs, out of frustration, revenge, so on and so forth, burned border posts, and they also destroyed the courthouses in the north of Kosovo, in north of Mitrovica, which was yet another sign that they weren't really that interested to be part of the future developments that Kosovo was going to go through. In all this, there was no help or no action from international community that was present in Kosovo. So we had, from 2008, we had this new reality in the north of Kosovo, this new reality of a territory of not more than 10,000 square kilometers being totally unruled by the Kosovo institutions. So then this was a pretext on the need to start yet another dialogue process that has not, proven to be fruitful at all in the recent years, especially in the last few years, but especially since the September agreement in Washington. Kosovo really suffered huge regress in international fora, so to speak, and has not seen any major developments, even in when it comes to its European perspective. That it's, of course, constantly there in rhetoric, but as it was mentioned here before me, Kosovo still doesn't have visa liberalization, and the conditions for granting Kosovo visa liberalization has been fulfilled, but for some obscure reason, this has not been completed yet. So I think before we talk about normalization and what the normalization will entail, I think it's really important to clarify the main aim of the process. And from what I can understand from statements, from recent statements coming out of incoming Prime Minister, the dialogue will not be a priority, but also how we go about the dialogue. There are very many signs and hints that the new incoming government will propose a different approach. And when I say a different approach is the fact that they mentioned that there is a real need to start a dialogue with communities in Kosovo. And I think if the main aim of the dialogue was to accommodate Serb community, then to me, it's to this day not very clear why do we have to talk to the Serbian president rather than establish a dialogue with the communities in Kosovo. In this case, with the Serb community in Kosovo, in the north especially. And so I think the conditions were never created for Kosovo institutions to reach out properly to the north of Kosovo. And I think the international community has a huge responsibility here as well, because they have, I think they have never kind of supported the creation of conditions that the government, the institutions reach out to the north, but also to offer the citizens of the north the opportunity to decide whether they would like to at least consider whether they would like to find some kind of solution with Kosovo institutions. And I say this because a particular political party was allowed to be established in Kosovo, and I refer to Lista Srpska here, who directly have direct links to President Vučić, even publicly. This is not some secret. So instead of helping the citizens in the north try and find out for themselves who they want to be represented by, they have allowed, I mean, everyone involved has allowed to have this creature called Lista Srpska, that to this day it's rather playing an obstructionist role than any kind of a constructive role. So I think I do agree that maybe the approach to the dialogue should be really looked carefully, and maybe support the process that goes more towards talking to the local Serbs in Kosovo, or the local Serbs in the north, but other communities as well in Kosovo. There are other communities who live there as well. So a proper, healthy discussion or dialogue with the community, between the government and the communities, should take place first of all. And then whatever the remaining issues that need to be discussed with Serbia. That should be another level. So I think before we continue, or before we kind of focus on this, the fact that incoming Prime Minister has said that the dialogue is not a priority, maybe we can look into what it would entail for the government to have the opportunity to reach out to the north of Kosovo, and for the citizens of the north to be able to at least have the opportunity to decide for themselves whether they want to be governed by institutions of Kosovo, or whether they want to continue being told what to do from Serbia. So I think maybe I leave it on this when it comes to normalization. But with regards to Kosovo's position vis-a-vis EU, I think the main obstacle there is, and I really, when I say the main obstacle, this is the crux of the matter, is the 5 non-recognizers. And to this day, it's really not very clear why there is, in one hand, this rhetoric that Kosovo has a European perspective, but on the other hand, there are the 5 recognizers who actually are a detriment to the rhetoric of the perspective, EU perspective for Kosovo. I'm more than happy to answer questions, to take any other questions from you as well, Mehmet. But for now, I think I'll leave it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, this was also a very comprehensive presentation of the challenges. And from these challenges, I think among these challenges, the most thorny ones are the North Kosovo and the relations with the international actors, especially for the recognition of Kosovo and its relations with the European Union. So thank you very much for this intervention. We have a few questions from the audience. So I would like to bring these questions to the table. I have a question for Dr. İsa Blumi. So the question is, what are the challenges and obstacles that the new government will face in its fight against organized crime and corruption? Maybe this is because that the organized crime and corruption, these are issues that are suffered by many successor countries to the Ottoman state, and maybe that's why the question came to you. So could you please comment on that?
Yeah, corruption is very difficult, but just remember who's corrupting the corrupt. This is one of the big problems will never be addressed. Alban Kurti, as was mentioned before, is very familiar with the larger critique of global capitalism, and of colonialism, imperialism, and unfortunately we're not going to address corruption in Kosovo unless we deal with those who are actually invested in corrupting politicians in Kosovo. And we have to understand why they are corrupted. There is the petty corruption, there is the kind of taking advantage of power, and the certainly the patronage dynamics that are at play in any society. But there's the larger structural international dynamics of corruption, which makes Kosovo's natural resources very valuable to certain actors who are more than willing to find political interlocutors at the local level who will, for very cheaply, sell off the resources of Kosovo and its future for pennies on the dollar, as I mentioned before, very much akin to what we saw in the Soviet Union, the post-Soviet Union period, very much akin to what we see throughout the global South, on and off since the end of direct colonialism. So how do we fight corruption? Cooperation from the outside world could also, be a very important component. But when you literally have powerful regional actors and larger European/American players corrupt themselves, and here I'm referring to perhaps not very politically, but the Bidens, right, and their relationship with Ukraine, and the whole dynamics of South Stream oil, which is affecting Balkan politics until today. And if we don't resolve these issues, Kosovo's other, let's say, regional issues will not be resolved either, regardless if we have a perfectly purified political class or not, because there is regional and international politics that corrupt our societies. We cannot be immune to these corrupting factors on our own. This is why we've had political parties who have been supported directly or indirectly for years and sustained this corrupt system. It's because they facilitated this larger international political economy of exploiting resources, natural resources, supply chain dynamics, and especially energy pipeline factors, which, again, Kosovo is sadly in the middle of a very important struggle that's affecting Europe, Eurasia, and the Middle East.
Yes, this is very important to take into account international dynamics while talking about corruption, and thank you for reminding that. Usually we tend to focus on the domestic actors while talking about corruption, but I mean, if thought together with organized crime, corruption is a transnational and international phenomenon. So it also has to do very much with how Kosovo will be integrated in international organizations like Interpol, and how the European Union will advance its institutional relations with Kosovo, and so forth. So thank you for that comment. And linked to this remark, I would like to ask the question which came for Engjellushe. Considering the earlier objections to the Vetëvendosje's coming to the power, how will Western actors are to cooperate with the Vetëvendosje, and how much are they willing to do so?
Sorry about that. I think there was a disinformation campaign going on for quite a long time, saying that international community doesn't like Albin Kurti or Vetëvendosje, or are not willing to work with them. When Albin Kurti established Khan, before that, even as a student leader, he had a lot of interaction with international community, and was an eloquent partner of these international partners coming in and out of Kosovo. Same with Khan, and even now in recent years, we have seen that there is interaction, and especially in Europe, he's much more accepted and actually respected than in the US. But I don't think this stands. I think it was more of a, like I said, it was more of a misinformation campaign going on, that they will not be liked and they will be refused. I don't see that at all. I think probably there will be much healthier relationship when it comes to the future development of Kosovo that we have seen so far. And the reason why I say this is because what we have seen in recent years, it was more of a reactive policy making, internal and international policy making from Kosovar leaders. So they were, most of the time they were waiting to be told what they should be doing. And I don't think this will be the case from now on. So I see a different, more constructive relationship developing further.
Thank you for these relieving remarks. And now I'd like to read the question which came for Leon. Do you think the deals, actually deals are in quotes, so do you think the deals brokered or sold by the Trump administration, like the documents signed in September and the land swap idea, will still be on the table? Excuse me, your microphone is muted, so could you turn it on, please?
Okay, I'm not sure if I heard the second part of the question. The deals brokered by the Trump administration and the second part of the question.
Okay, let me read it again. Do you think the deals brokered or sold by the Trump administration, like the document signed in September and the land swap idea, will still be on the table?
And the land swap
idea.
Land swap. Okay, sorry. Okay, I understand that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think first the deals brokered by the Trump administration, there's a bit of question legally to if they are obligatory on the sides first. So in that sense, they might be partly implemented depending on the level of interest perceived and depending on the vigor that they're pursued by the new administration. I think if there's overall, the Secretary of State will seek continuity to the degree possible from the previous government. So they will try to implement or to pursue what in a way makes sense to them, and they may not be as vigorous on parts of the deal that are not really in their interest so much. Regarding the land swap, it's interesting. I think in principle the idea is dead. At the same time, if the sort of deadlock lingers for too long, there will be more stakeholders that keep mentioning that. You can see the latest paper by the ICG, in a way, so it's still mentioned there. So in principle, if the cost of no deal becomes too high, this idea will keep cropping up. But at this moment in time, I think in Belgrade they realize that this idea is a no-go at the moment, and in Kosovo there's no serious political actor that mentions this idea at the moment. Although I think to be fair, this idea became a bit radioactive, more because it got politicized. It became part of the domestic political debate. And it was also partly because based on the unpredictability of how this could be implemented. Personally, I was in many sort of close discussions where I would hear positive inclinations to the idea, but strong resistance, precisely because of perhaps along the way Belgrade could change the terms and bring us to a fait accompli, which would not be to our satisfaction. So, but in principle, this idea will only be sort of scotched and will be closed if a better one is actually pushed forward and works.
Thank you very much for your response. Now I have a question which again came for Leon, but I would also invite other speakers to comment on that because it's an interesting question. How will Kosovo's relations with Albania unfold under the new administration, and what are the options of the Vetëvendosje government to advance relations with Albania?
Okay, well, since it's for me, I'll start shortly, and then I would be also curious myself to hear my other colleagues about their opinion. But in principle, Vetëvendosje, and here I support what Engjellushe said, because I think the image of Vetëvendosje was a bit, let's say, some of the worrisome parts of some previous statements by Vetëvendosje took much more of an echo internationally than they needed. I think it was a bit, as we often tend to demonize all the parties depending on in some stages. And Vetëvendosje was seen as very much pro-union with Albania. At the same time, I think the relations between the leadership in Kosovo and leadership in Albania were probably at an all-time low. And for various reasons, partly because of the involvement of Albania's Prime Minister Rama in a way in the dialogue with Serbia in a way which was not to Kosovo's liking. So this was certainly not welcome in Kosovo in the past, I think about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. So this will certainly be, Kosovo and Albania will need to find a sort of a new balance. Also, despite I think relations are extremely friendly. So Kosovo, Albania will be by far, remains the most friendly country to Kosovo in a way. Our lifeline. We built a highway to Albania when the borders with other countries and the roads with other countries were completely insecure. So Albania remains the strongest lifeline. At the same time, there will be a bit of a rebalance sought. Albania also will need to find the best language, the way it treats and speaks to Kosovo, but also on a practical level. You hear all sorts of, discourse about the friendly and brotherly relations. At the same time, Kosovo has significant problems with Albania with regard to trade policies. So very often it introduces strong barriers to our produce. So it's not as straightforward and as sort of frictionless as sometimes it seems from outside. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Are any other speakers willing to comment on this? Yes, Isa, please go on.
Okay.
No,
well,
please go ahead.
Please. Okay. Just very quickly concur. Leon is very right to one caution that things have changed. Certainly, there is, I think, a personality conflict between the Rama's people and Kurti. I think Kurti's symbolic victory is symbolic of what many people who have been taking to the streets in Albania have been looking for, and this could be and lead to a kind of a continuation of what Vetëvendosje has done into actualized politics on the streets of Albania, which again is waiting for similar kinds of collective action against a government that has really lost much all credibility to large segments of the population. So I think this will cause tensions between this new government, just because I think lots of people in Albania have now seen this as an inspiration to continue on with their efforts to force a change of government in Albania itself. So I'll leave it at that, but there are other things to add also. Yeah.
Yeah, Leon will add something. So yes, please.
If I could, very short. Also, please note, Albania has elections in April, which is just around the corner, and Vetëvendosje in Albania is the registered party there. So the timing is very short, but it will be curious to see that this energy and this sort of enthusiasm in Kosovo and apathy in Albania, how much of that translates into the electoral score in Albania. So it's certainly part of the narrative. Maybe, but I wouldn't say it's too strong, but let's see how much of that spills over.
Yeah, and Engjellushe, would you like to add to that?
So I just want to say briefly that no matter who is in power in Albania or in Kosovo, there is a natural link between Kosovo and Albania. There's the cultural link, there is the relationship links. Many people in Kosovo have family ties to Albania and so on and so forth. But in this case, I think when Albin Kurti was the prime minister last year for a short period of time, he initiated or wanted to initiate governmental meetings between Kosovo and Albania, but he was obstructed by different institutional leaders in Kosovo, and Edi Rama, Albania's prime minister, did not show any particular willingness to start this, because I think they were all expecting to see him go soon. But apart from this, I think another phenomena that both Leon and Isa mentioned is this not only in Albania, but in other regional countries, you hear more often people wanting to see the same change in their own countries as what it took place in Kosovo, because the trust in institutions and leaders has been very, very low for some time in Balkan countries, because, elections are not a tool to bring about change. They're just a tool to keep establishments in power. And what happened in Kosovo is something that everyone is admiring. But in particular in Albania, as Leon mentioned, there are upcoming elections, but Vetëvendosje is already established there, and they will be running as independent candidates. So I think this would be something to look very closely, whether Albanians themselves will want Vetëvendosje to be strong in Albania without Albin Kurti having to do anything from Kosovo.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to wait and see. And we don't have too much time to wait, so we will have the answer within a couple of months. Thank you very much for these insightful comments. I mean, the relations with Albania is something that I'm also very curious to see, the developments and also the responses from other countries, from the region and from international arena. So I have two questions left, which are quite linked to each other. So I'm just going to read them together and open the floor for any speakers, because no specific name is mentioned here. So the first question is that this year's elections was the fourth general elections in less than 7 years. Can we finally expect some political stability in Kosovo? And the second question is that, since the Vetëvendosje is now the predominant political actor, what may happen to the two mainstream parties? Will they likely transform or wait for the Vetëvendosje to blunder or fail? Or should we expect the political scene to change completely? Good questions. Okay, please. whoever would like to take the floor, I will give the floor. Yes, Engjellushe.
I can try. I think the first question was more or less answered. Vetëvendosje has a very strong mandate, and this is actually quite good in many ways, because just as a reminder, during the pandemics, the legislation really failed to pass very important legislation in order to help population with the pandemics, because of the politicking and because of all the, whatever goes on behind the closed doors, and they couldn't come to some sort of an agreement. Like the economic recovery failed to be voted in the parliament in crisis 7th time. So I think now this is good news in many ways, because probably we won't see such a thing, because it's one party with a very strong mandate. That's already a good news in many ways. And by the way, this is 6 snap elections since 2010 in Kosovo. It's not 4, so it's even worse. And the second question is, I also think for other parties, this is good news, because they will have time to reflect. They will have the time to hopefully reform. If they reflect properly, they will realize that there is a serious need for reform. Maybe one or two party might wither further in the next elections, because, like I said, they mainly did not have anything to offer in the previous legislations, and their policy approach was more reactive rather than proactive. So I think it's good. I think Vetëvendosje's win, the way that it kind of unfolded in Kosovo, sent very positive signals around. Like for other parties, for example, we have seen mass resignation in LDK. So hopefully there will be party elections in there, and the party will start reforming. It's about time for LDK, for example, to start reforming. For PTK, it's really good time to sit and reflect, especially after they have lost their leader in a way. 2 of their most popular leaders are sitting in Hague now. So for them, this is great opportunity to look into what exactly happened to them in the past years.
Okay, are the other participants also do they want to say something? Yes, Isa, please go ahead.
Leon, please, you're up before me. Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. It's Mehmet's discretion. In any case,
okay, Leon, you can go, and then I'll give the floor
to you. Okay, but maybe very shortly. I mean, this is kind of a standard. I would say it's a standard answer. It's for any party which wins such a large mandate, a big chunk of that, and in a way much more than just a year ago. So that's clear. These are not votes that were always like loyal votes to this party. So these are either, I mean, partly it's new voters, it's young people and women. And this is something that actually in my previous engagements as a think tank with many papers we used to argue, listen, young people are not voting, women are not voting, nobody's capturing their votes. And Vetëvendosje did that. They listened to that, and they went and tried to sort of respond to the needs and agendas of these 2 major categories. Another big category is diaspora. And diaspora has one sort of advantage, is that they're by default they're out. They cannot be part of the nepotistic in a way and clientelistic networks. In a way, they're not the ones who benefited from in the previous administrations. But overall, and some of them were basically voters who abandoned other parties. LDK had a big split up. And basically the main candidate for the prime minister, who got almost as many votes as Kurti last elections, she switched and joined the list of Vetëvendosje. Not the party, but the electoral list. So that there's a big distinction there. So these are partly the reasons. So some of these votes will stay with Vetëvendosje if they govern well. and some of them will not stay if they don't govern well. And actually, even if they govern well, some of them will be disappointed, because you can never satisfy everybody's expectations. So, but we'll see. We will have quite soon another test. We'll have municipal elections in the fall. So this will be a big test for Vetëvendosje if they're able to sort of identify good candidates for the municipal elections, and they certainly have the machinery sort of to gather to mobilize the votes. At the same time, it will depend if these voters again start to abstain, not to vote at all, or if they go back to other parties, will very much depend on the other parties which were lost and how fast they can sort of come back with the reasonable narrative. At the moment, as Engjellushe said, they're consumed quite. They're looking for who's to blame, why they lost, the reasons, and slowly starting to kind of think if they should be recruiting popular figures again, and this will take time. I don't see it. Look, even for Vetëvendosje, I think it was said this was not sudden. They've been in the picture for almost 2 decades in one shape or another as an alternative. So it will take. I would predict this will not happen so fast. I think many in Kosovo are already in a way predicting that we will have basically, this is kind of Kurti's decade. We had Rogova's decade, we have Thaçi's decade, and in a way this will be, of course it's, as I say, it's very risky to predict, but I think the change that happened is fairly monumental in that sense. So I think other parties should better reflect deeply and try to figure out, because also we don't need Kosovo without an opposition. You can never have good governance if the opposition is in total disarray. And I'm afraid it will not be as fast before they can really come back and present an alternative, reasonable agenda.
Yeah, Leon sounds a bit more cautious about predicting about Kosovo's political stability, but I think it's obvious that the other parties have a lot of things to consider and do for their own future and Kosovo's political future as well. Would you like to say?
No, I did not hesitate to talk about that. I just thought that was quite obvious and I think well answered. For the first time in history, you have a party which basically has almost half of the votes. So this will be, in a way, the easiest majority to retain. Vetëvendosje would be expectedly will have about 58 members of parliament. They only need 3 to have a simple majority of 61. So this will be by far the easiest. And for the first time, only one Albanian sort of political party from the Albanian ethnic group will be able to keep the majority, only with 3, let's say, MPs from ethnic minorities, without having to bring on board one of the smaller political groupings, which in my previous speech I considered sort of quite healthy and positive. So because you don't have to do horse trading ahead of votes in the parliament each time.
Thank you for the clarification. And finally, I will go to İsa to make the final remarks, and then I will wrap it up.
Okay, very correct and accurate and smart analysis from my two other colleagues. I would maybe highlight a couple of things that could possibly serve as problems coming down the road. Kurti is an excellent orator. He's a very good person-to-person guy. He's good with larger audiences. He knows how to communicate better than anyone in recent Albanian politics. And he's able to also communicate to the outside world directly because of his ability to speak in English, and again, in a very coherent and smart way. It's not quite clear. He also has very smart people around him who are very dedicated to him and the movement, which I think bodes well. They will be able to fill portfolios at the very top, at least. But the big issue, as with all transitional governments, is what do you do with those who are actually had positions in government through career trajectories or have been part of previous governments? We see that with the United States. You can win an election, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have the government working on your behalf. So there's many pitfalls in the future if indeed there's going to be organized foot dragging, or if there's it's going to be a very delicate process of making this party a party for all members of a functioning government, from the police from various ministries, and certainly municipal elections will be an important component to see just how deep this change, this shift in power is actually going to happen. The diaspora is also very important, and one of the reasons why the diaspora is so much behind this victory is because it's a generational change. It's no longer the old guard, the ones who grew up in the 1980s and supported the war efforts. It's their children. It's the generation who moved to the West after the war. And in many times they don't even remember the events of the war, but they are very much mobilized by very popular themes that Kurti is able to tap into. And they see common cause, which was not iterated very well or articulated very well by other parties. And it's not clear that they'll be able to do so in terms of communication for the medium term forward. So we could see continued growth of Vetëvendosje's kind of influence over domestic politics. But it has to produce results. And so this is my primary concern and warning, is that do we have cooperation from government itself, the actual day-to-day apparatus of the government, which again has functioned in a dysfunctional way in many occasions. And is that going to be easy to change? I don't think so. And we're going to need a lot of help with a lot of money, perhaps, to make this vision that Kurti and Vetëvendosje has provided people to actually make it something possible with a society and a government that looks the way it does at this stage.
Thank you very much. Actually, our time is now up, so I would like to close this excellent panel. I think we touched upon almost everything, so I'm delighted with the interventions and insights coming from our four speakers, İsa Blumi, Leon Malazogu, Engjellushe Morina, and also in absentia, Erhan Türbedar. So I would like to close this session. Again, thank you for participating, and thank you for listening, all the audience. And I hope to see you in our future events. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.